Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Gagnon Atelier. I'm your old pal, Tim Gagnon, and today I have got a great show for you. I am so excited. I have got my friend right over here, that way, Gavin Gardner, and he is going to be talking to us about his art, his career, and in particular, something really neat called Silverpoint. And so with that said, guys, just a couple little things we're going to talk about today before we get started, and that is our little housekeeping stuff. Remember to please like the Gagnon Atelier page on Facebook, as well as right here on the bottom of the screen, you see it scrolling across. We have a YouTube channel that you can watch all of these videos. Currently, we have 2 of our Facebook Live videos that we have posted onto YouTube. There'll be another one going on there today right after this broadcast. And that way you can watch these things over and over and over again and share them with your friends. But if you can like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel, that would be great. And also, if you can share this video, or better yet, host a watch party, that would be great. We would really appreciate that very much. And so without further ado, we've got Gavin right here. So Gavin, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Gagnon Atelier Modern Masters podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Tim. It's an honor and a pleasure. So.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, tell us a little bit, because you and I, we just met yesterday. And so I've been following your work on Facebook for a while now, and I'm really blown away. And I've been fascinated with Silverpoint. I teach at my local state college as an adjunct professor. And one of the classes that I teach is called Understanding the Visual Arts. And there's a very small section on metal point and how that works and what it's about. And so, having never done it myself, I hate that. I hate to teach things that I have never done. And so I had tried to get into it a little bit, and I ordered some digital, not digital ground, some ground that the Golden Company makes for Silverpoint. Bought a Silverpoint pen, and started drawing with it, and instantly fell in love. And then I came across your Facebook page and saw that you do that. So I'm excited to talk to you about that. But you are also quite an accomplished sculptor. And so tell us a little bit about your background, your career, and where you started, where you are now, where you're going.
Sure. So I've really always been into art, as so many of us. I became interested in art as a kid, and my earliest memories were are of drawing from comic books, Conan the Barbarian.
There you go. Comics, yes.
Yeah. And, it progressed. I kept doing drawing primarily when I was younger, on into middle school and high school. And where I lived in Virginia, they had some summer governor programs that were state funded, and you had to apply for them and get accepted. And it was pretty prestigious, Performing in Visual Arts Northwest and or Pavon. I don't know if they still do it, but I kept applying and getting accepted into that every summer, and started getting a pretty good training from some of the local artists during middle school and high school.
Oh, wow. That early. That's nice that you can get that early of an education like that.
Yeah. And I would really encourage anybody to get their kids to start early. I think the earlier the better. So all of the courses were college level classes with local artists who taught university and stuff like that. And I also, I would say my decision to become an artist was when I was 14 years old. It's kind of a nice romantic story.
Those are the best ones. I said, those are the best ones.
Yeah. It was the day before Christmas Eve. And I was going to stay with my aunt in the Washington, D.C. area for the holidays for a little bit. And she had to work, so she said, why don't I drop you off at one of the museums? So she took me to the National Gallery of Art.
Oh, wow.
And left me there for the day with my sketchbook. And I'll never forget this. I walked around the museum looking for something to draw.
Oh,
and settled on this female figure carved by an Italian marble carver, Pita Luga. And I was captivated by the glistening crystalline structure of the marble. It was just so beautiful to me. And I sat there and drew that marble statue until they kicked me out at the end of the day.
Oh, wow.
That night, I went home and announced to my family that I was going to become a sculptor.
Wow. That'll do it.
And I started talking to people at the Performing and Visual Arts Northwest and networking with some of those artists. And I specifically wanted a stone carver to study with, because that was my interest. And it's esoteric, and not a lot of people do stone, and it's difficult. And,
right.
I've never liked anything that was easy or that everybody else does. So a little bit of a rebel. And anyway, to make a very long story short, I found a master stone carver over in the Winchester, Virginia area by the name of Malcolm Harlow, and he's still there working. And he had carved stone at the Washington National Cathedral for more than 10 years.
Wow.
In full-time gargoyles, all kinds of things. So for 2.5 years in high school, I studied in his studio under a master sculptor and carver every week. So for 2.5 years, and he started teaching me about mold making, and we had anatomy classes. You know, it was a miniature atelier. There would occasionally be some other students, and go through stone carving, and on breaks we would always have literary and poetry readings. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, and he would go and pick grapes from the arbor that he walked under, going down to his garden. And
that's amazing.
Yeah.
What an amazing story that is. I mean, that's literally like the old master's apprenticeships.
It is.
Wow.
And I was very blessed, and what a wonderful teacher and great storyteller. And from there, I started getting more interested in sculpture specifically, and clay modeling, because I've always been a voracious reader, like so many people are. And I just kept reading that in biographies and how-to books, that people really need to learn clay modeling before they get into stone. Stone being a reductive art form, clay being an additive. You can always change clay, but stone, no. So I kind of, that was really the segue. And I had a detour from stone carving for many, many, many years. I went to Shepherd University my first year, and wasn't, that's in West Virginia, wasn't too fond of that. It was kind of a negative experience. My first day of class as a sculpture student in college, the instructor took a look at my portfolio and said, wow, you know more about sculpture than I do. I'm going to put you in independent study for the year.
Wow.
And, you know, I have an ethical problem with education doing that, taking a student's money and essentially letting the teachers abdicate their positions, not really deliver. And after 1 year, I left. And I was very disenchanted with college at that point. And I found out that there was another master carver from the Washington National Cathedral in the area, Frederick E. Hart, and he passed away in 99 or 2000. But I hounded him for about a year and kept calling him and saying, I'd like a job. I'd like a job as your studio assistant. I want to learn, teach me. And he would say, I'm not hiring, but call back later. And he'd say, call back next month. I called him every couple of weeks for a year. And he finally said, okay, come out to the studio. And he lived down near Front Royal, Virginia. And his claim to fame is he sculpted and designed the famous tympanum over the front entrance of the Washington National Cathedral.
Oh, wow.
It's ex nihilo, and about the creation of man and by God, and profoundly gifted sculptor. And he interviewed me, and I was blessed enough to be his studio assistant for the next year. And he was so kind and generous and had done so well. I was driving a long distance to get to his studio every day. And it was becoming difficult. And so he built a bedroom on the back of the studio for me to stay.
Really?
And I stayed there and worked there. He let me use the studio at night after work. And it was just a wonderful experience. And then he recommended that I attend the Lime Academy College of Fine Arts, which was really at its peak back then, I think. That was in Old Lyme, Connecticut. And it was really one of the very first American academies, or part of that Atelier movement. Or, I mean, it predates Florence Academy, any of these other places, and it was really at the forefront. A lot of my teachers there were adjunct at Yale. So Dean Keller, who was a famous anatomist and studied with George Bridgman, and his father was also a Yale instructor and historian, who is the subject of the movie Monument Men.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of his claim to fame. And, you know, really interesting stuff. So, I mean, I love to talk. I could go on for eons, but so many of the other teachers were just very well trained, classically trained. The founders, Elizabeth and Lottie de Guérandet, had actually met Rodin. They were very old, and I think one of them had studied with him briefly or knew some people who had. And, you know, that was really where I don't know, I went through the classical boot camp and learned all of the human anatomy. And we had to go to Yale University. There was a doctor who sponsored the school, a surgeon, and he would get us access to the medical labs at Yale. And we would go down there for cadaver dissections, and we'd get to take molds off of the cadavers. And, you know, it was very intense and very studious. And I graduated from there in 2000 and with a degree in sculpture, BFA, and instantly had work waiting for me, which was good.
It's always the best way to have it when you have work waiting for you. That's good.
I did portrait busts for several years, and then immediately after that, I started getting commissions for a Catholic church in North Potomac, Maryland, that came this close to becoming a cathedral, actually. The
Oh, really? Wow.
But for some reason that didn't work out, and it's certainly beautiful enough. It was the design of the church was based off of a famous church in Italy, Santa Croce.
Okay.
And the architect who designed Our Lady of Mercy is just very gifted. And so I worked with another sculptor, Sarah Hempel, and very gifted. And we went into the contract as partners to do the 14 Stations of the Cross in high relief, 2 foot by 4 foot. And our agreement was we didn't really want to collaborate because artist egos and it's very challenging to work on the same piece. How do you do that? So,
right, especially with sculpture, that seems like it would be even more difficult.
Exactly. So we put numbers in a hat, and we picked numbers, and we agreed that we would do a certain number of trades, so we could swap our numbers, and we would completely execute those 7 pieces from start to finish. And we would collaborate and have input on all of the designs together. So that's what we did. And after that, I went on to do another commission for the same church, their tabernacle in bronze. And that project took me maybe 3 to 5 years. It was
really, wow.
I taught myself architecture, classical architecture, while I was doing it. And I was just devouring books about the classical orders, Tuscan and Doric and Ionic, and molding proportions, and how molding proportions are, or moldings are conceptually designed. And I think I did more than 200 architectural drawings by hand before I started.
Before you even started the tabernacle.
Yeah, and a lot of people said, "Why don't you do CAD?" And you know, I'm a hands-on guy, so and kind of a technical.
You know, it's funny. You know, I grew up, you know, going to church in we had a cathedral in our town, and it was St. Anne's Catholic church, and I mean it was a big church. And then right down the road from my house, we had St. Joseph's Cathedral, and I can tell you those Stations of the Cross, you know, in St. Anne's, that was like cathedral. You know, it had the carved ceiling. You know, it had the Book of Daniel in the ceiling over the altar. It had you know, it had the cherubim and the seraphim holding up the ceiling with, you know, on the pillars. I mean, it was just, it's one of the most stunning churches you could ever see. And you know, that was where my grandparents went. At St. Joseph's, they didn't have all of that because it was just your traditional church. But what they did have at St. Joseph were life-sized Stations of the Cross.
Wow.
And so, you know, as a little boy growing up Catholic, you know, it was like my older brother and I would have what we called pew wars. And what a pew war is you put your hand on the pew in front of you and you spread your arms out as far as you can to collect as much real estate as you can, while your brother on the other side is pushing. So your hands are like this and pushing and trying to, you know, we're fighting over that. And then my dad had this technique where he would lean over and put his arm like this, and he would take both our heads and go do and knock our heads together.
Wow.
And we'd be like, oh, pay attention. But at St. Joseph's, you know, it was hard to goof off because you would look, you know, and you'd look around the church and there's Jesus standing there looking at you carrying the cross. And you're like, oh, you know. But at St. Anne's, the cathedral, my head was just like this the whole time. I mean, I was so blown away. And the artist's name was Giovanni Castagnoli. And he did a bunch of churches in Quebec, and then also in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, basically all throughout New England. And then apparently he went out to California. And this was way back in the 30s. And his stuff, I mean, it was like I was in Italy. You know, you'd go to church and you're in Italy with all the sculptures and stuff. So, you know, it's hearing that you did that, it just reminded me of my childhood sitting in Catholic church, looking around going, whoa, you know, and the impact that had on me as an artist, you know, and I think, you know, for me and my viewers that know me and follow me, they know that my art and my faith are like two sides of the same coin. And you and I have had discussions about that as well in your life. And I can look back on my life and going to church and seeing this world-class art every time. That had an impact on me very dramatically, I think, as an artist. So
that's wonderful. And you know, art can definitely be a visual ministry. And my family is very religious, and that actually goes back 5 generations. And I was raised very religiously, left the church, but that experience working for the church is what brought me back to a place where I was re-examining my faith. And I did become a Christian again when I was doing those projects, because you start thinking about what you're doing, and with the upbringing that I had, I really wanted these to be a ministry to somebody. And Sarah is a Christian too, the sculptor that I was working with, and we would pray together about it being a successful ministry. And so that really marks the time in my life when I delved back into my faith and really had a personal experience with it. And after that, I'm trying to think. So I worked on commissions for many, many years, worked for another sculptor in the Maryland area. He's wonderful, Toby Mendez. And we worked on monuments for the Boston Red Sox, Baltimore Orioles, all kinds of high-profile jobs. And that was a really good experience. And after that, I had this experience where I think everybody knows that the artistic lifestyle can, in kind of a cliche way, tend towards imbalance. And at that time, when I was working for the sculptor and trying to make my art happen, I was literally working for 14 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, for more than a decade.
Right.
And I got to a point where the only way I can say it is I felt the spiritual toll that it was taking on me.
Right.
And, as a Christian, I believe that people should have certain internal spiritual qualities that are gifted to them by God, and peace and rest and enjoyment, and a lot of these things. And to be honest, I was working so hard that I made a decision. I can't maintain this forever, and it's not good for my personal well-being. And I made a decision then to go to grad school, and I started to think, I'm almost then I was maybe 38, and I kept thinking, I'm almost 40 years old. At some point, I'm going to want to gear down just a little bit, settle down, maybe get married, have a family. And I'm working so hard, I'm not even meeting anybody. I'm not even leaving my studio. So
the artist life can be tough. It can be really tough. I mean, and when you talk about the spiritual toll, most artists, like my studio here behind me, I don't leave these 4 walls very often because I'm creating, and the creative process can be exhausting.
Yeah.
It can be exhausting physically, spiritually, mentally. It just sucks it all out of you. And if you don't replenish that by having a balanced life, you're going to have burnout, and it's going to be bad.
Yeah. And I'm a big advocate now for a balanced lifestyle. And
Right.
and it's one of the things I talk to people about the most, because so many artists that I've known are like creative monsters, and they eat, sleep, drink, and breathe their studio life. And I don't know. I made a decision to go to grad school because I wanted to develop my art, absolutely, but I thought I need something sustainable, and teaching offered me a certain sustainability where I can make my income through teaching and work on my own work and not necessarily have to do commissions. So that's really what I did. And I went to the Laguna College of Art and Design, Laguna Beach, and did a master's in painting and drawing. And my idea really was to marry traditional sculpture with traditional painting, and in a way that's never been done before. And everybody has no doubt heard of polychrome sculpture. Where, and I would define polychrome personally as simply a sculpture that has multiple flat colors on it. But there is a vast difference between that and painting, because in painting, you have a built-in light source, you have value, you have light and shadow, you have color, temperature, all of these other things. And that is what I wanted to experiment with. So I produced reliefs while I was in school. A couple of those won prizes at the Portrait Society of America.
I've got that one. Let me show that on the screen so people can see what you're talking about, because yeah, this one did win at the Portrait Society, and my viewers know that that I'm a member of the Portrait Society, and we talk about it a lot, and a lot of our guests have been members as well. So this was the sculpture. Tell us a little bit about this.
So that one, I believe that won an award in 2010, 2011. And I revisited that during my master's program, not as a new sculpture, but as a test piece, because I wanted to test the painting approach and the theory of what I was doing. I had to create my own theory because I've never seen anybody else do it. And so I developed the painting on this, and I wanted to turn this into a semi-sacred piece. And the title of the work is Kalos Kai Agathos, which is a phrase the Athenian aristocracy used to refer to themselves back in the day. And it means a balance between the good and the beautiful, or it kind of refers to the aesthetic and ideological human ideal. And we talk about the ideal model and ideals of beauty and all of these other things. So I wanted to, back when I sculpted it, I wanted to insert something culturally relevant, punk culture. That's something I grew up around quite a bit, and challenge those ideals of beauty. And they change. They change throughout the ages. And now you see artists painting models that are tattooed and have piercings and all of these other things. And as a Christian, it occurred to me I did grow up in the kind of, I don't know, fringe culture. A lot of my friends would classify as punks, and we all wore black and had mohawks. There was a lot of judgment by the church. That was kind of my rebellion at the time. And I knew that everybody, I don't know, I took some pride in knowing that everybody hated it. And But, now that I've grown up, there are so many people who defy appearances, and you truly can't judge a book by its cover.
Right.
When I moved to California, I went to some of the more liberal churches out there, and I mean, people, some of the churchgoers were completely tatted up like gang members, and you would just think, whoa, if you met them on the street, some people would anyway. But they were the sweetest, most gentle, kind people. And I really think that God can be everywhere. God can occur or exist and speak to us through the most unlikely individuals. And I think that actually Scripture says God delights in that.
Yes, yeah, that's in First Corinthians, yeah, where God goes out of his way to choose the least likely candidates,
Yep.
the poorest, the ones that aren't rich or powerful or this or that, and he does it to show those that are rich, powerful, and all that in a box of Popeye's chicken that they're not.
Yes.
And that's really that's a scripture that's near and dear to my heart, because I'm like, wow, if God can use them, he can use me, because I'm a hot mess too.
Yep. And I love that. So and I think that that there's also one of my favorite books is The Scarlet Letter, and obviously about puritanical culture, early America. And at the end of the book, there is an invitation, I quote, to be true, be true, be true. Show freely to the world, if not your worst, something by which your worst or the worst may be inferred.
Right.
And the point is, religion there historically has been so much pretense, and it's hypocritical. I mean, people put on the right hairdo and the right clothes, but maybe they're whitewashed sepulchres, as Scripture would say. And the Bible says, "Come as you are," and I think that God can be found in the broken and in the downtrodden.
Right. And so, is that what you were trying to do with this sculpture? You were trying to this relief that you've also painted. You're trying to show that there is, that God can work through the most unlikely sources.
Yeah.
And so that's really a great way to represent this. You got this punk hairdo and everything else, but it has, especially with the gilding, and I am a huge fan of gilding in art. It has that icon, that look and feel of a Orthodox Christian icon. With the gilding, and so it has that sacred feel to it, and yet it has an image that most people in the church world would be like, well, that doesn't look Christian, or it doesn't this or that, but it has that dichotomy of this sacred, but it doesn't look sacred, but yet it has that sacred feel to it. I really like it. Now, you've taken a relief sculpture here and you've painted it, which is very, very unique, at least to me, having seen this. So this is the way that you were, while you were in college, this is what you were playing with.
Yeah. And this one, the thing that was really interesting to me is in the Renaissance, there were debates about which was better, painting or sculpture.
Yes.
They were constantly pitted against each other as dichotomous opposites. And they really are. I had a feature article in International Artists Magazine where I talked about all of these and the spiritual components and the ideas behind the reliefs. But sculpture is monochromatic, highly dependent on a real light source, and it is literal form. Painting, on the other hand, has its own built-in illusionistic light source,
Yes.
has color, and creates the illusion of form. And so they seem to be opposites, but when you put them together, they can enhance each other. I enjoyed painting the shadow under her chin because there's a real shadow there. And so
Right.
using paint to accentuate a real shadow enabled me to push the relief to a point where
You could create even more depth than it really has in a
exactly.
lot of ways. Yeah, and it reminds me, because a lot of people don't know this, but ancient Roman statues and ancient Greek statues were painted.
Mm-hmm.
We see them as these black and white marble statues, but that's not what the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans saw. And there's some great videos out there, guys. If you want to look at like statues of Caesar that were painted, they have recreations of that. But yeah, a lot of people don't know that when the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks were looking, and they would see a statue way up high on a pedestal somewhere, it would look like a real person standing there because they painted them. So you're actually throwing back to antiquity in a lot of ways, in that beyond the Renaissance to an era long past.
Yeah. And
so that's great. Well, let's skip ahead, because
sure.
One of the things that you also done, I'm so excited. We're having so much fun. We're already 38 minutes in. This is awesome. But you have kind of stepped into an area that we talked about in the beginning, and that's something called Silverpoint.
Yes.
So metal point is way, like when I teach my class on understanding the visual arts, which is basically an art appreciation class for college freshmen. It's that mandatory humanities class they all have to take. They love me, I'm telling you. But with that said, it's like we talk about metal point, and really that's where lead pencils come from, because they were painting with actual lead on the paints. But before that happened, they were using metal point. And so tell us a little bit about what metal point is and how it works.
Sure.
A little bit of the nuts and bolts of it.
Okay.
And then let's talk about why you started getting into that, and what a lot of the things that you're doing.
Sure.
And I'm gonna, while you're doing that, I'm gonna bring up some of the pictures of some of your Silverpoint drawings, so people can see what they look like.
So Silverpoint, I think talking about the history is very important. Talking about the history of the pencil, which you've brought up, and all of us have heard about pencil lead, and we've heard that term since we were kids, and we've heard about lead pencils, but interestingly, when you stop and think about it, there's no lead in the pencil. There never has been. There's no point in history when the pencil had lead in it. So where does that term come from? It actually goes back to the Middle Ages, when a lot of monks, scribes, and people doing manuscripts, or other artists were actually using lead rods to make marks on parchment or paper or a board that had been prepared with a particular ground that's abrasive. And when the metal is dragged across that ground, it leaves a mark. So lead is actually, or a lead pencil is a complete misnomer that comes well, it has its roots in the origins of metal point. And metal point as a medium really started, my knowledge, back in the Middle Ages, and evolved into the Renaissance. And metal point is kind of a blanket term for all of the metals that were used over lead. Then people started using copper and really anything in between, alloys and whatnot. And when we tend to study silver point, most people had this notion that the art form reached its height during the Italian Renaissance and then died out mysteriously. And I think a lot of people who are interested in it uh, are nostalgic for this old world technique and skill and art form that no longer exists anymore. So bringing something back that is generally considered to be maybe a dead art form, or it was. I think that there are a lot of people doing it now. But interestingly, let's talk about the different metals as uh, Silverpoint rose in popularity during the Renaissance. Why did it die out after the Renaissance? And here is the very interesting thing. The graphite pencil, which we call lead, which has a link to the metal point, was actually invented in England in, I believe, 1564, which is right there in the middle of the Renaissance. And it's my personal theory. I can't confirm this yet, but it's my personal theory that graphite was invented as a poor man's replacement. Silver is expensive, and it's not easy for everybody to get.
Right.
And I mean, how many people do silver point now, and or gold point? They think, oh my goodness, that's going to cost me a fortune to get into precious metals. And I mean, it's not really expensive, but people have this.
Right. They have that thing. I'm going to show up on the screen here just to show people what to show how inexpensive these actually can be. So I'm going to put this on the screen here. I'll put a piece of paper over so they can see. There we go. That is a typical Silverpoint pen. And really all it is a little tiny wire of silver stuck into a plastic stylus. Yep. So that's not a lot of silver, folks. That's actually very little silver. And so I want to say this thing costs like $12.
Yeah.
So you can start Silverpoint very
10 cents.
Yeah. So it's not that expensive. And I would assume a gold one would be not much more expensive.
Maybe $50, $50, $60.
Right.
The really interesting thing with graphite and Silverpoint is I think that graphite replaced Silverpoint. And why? Because when you draw with silver on paper or any of the metal points, it leaves a gray mark. And when you accumulate metal on paper, silver point, gold point, it develops a metallic sheen when you turn it sideways. Interestingly enough, graphite does exactly the same thing.
It does.
This almost metallic sheen. And I really do think that it replaced it. And so the silver point and metal point technology became obsolete.
Right. And you also don't have to apply a ground when using graphite.
Exactly.
So there's no prep on the paper. So that saves time. It makes it easier. You can mark on anything very quickly. So it's kind of like, to me, graphite pencil is that it's that in between Silverpoint and charcoal.
Yes.
Because you can mark on anything like charcoal without any prep. It smudges sort of like charcoal, but it has a very similar look to Silverpoint. I was quite surprised, having never done Silverpoint. Once I started working with it, I was very surprised at how similar it felt and looked to graphite, having no idea, going in totally novice, totally blind, and drawing with it for the first time. I was like, A, ooh, I like it. But B, surprising at how much it reminded me of graphite pencil.
Well, it does have similarities. You're right, and it also has some noteworthy differences. But I really like materials and methods and the chemistry and the science of these materials. So to talk just for a second, I want to talk about some of the primary differences. But graphite is made up of a naturally occurring isotope of carbon, which
Yes.
is graphite. And they take the graphite powder from nature and they combine it with kaolin clay.
Mm-hmm.
And that is essentially, sometimes they add wax into it, but that's essentially how the full range of graphite pencils are made. If there's more graphite, then that means that there's less clay. That means the pencil is softer, and that means that more graphite is going to be deposited. So you get your B range. As it goes up to the HB range, you're going to have more of a 50-50 mix of kaolin clay and graphite. And then when you go up into the 2H, the 4H, the 6H, the balance goes the other way. And
Right.
60, 70, 80% kaolin clay. So here's the thing. There really is a correlation between graphite and Silverpoint. The difference is Silverpoint doesn't really erase.
Right.
There are ways that people have kind of gotten around that. I won't really get into those, but pencil can be erased. And while graphite exhibits the full range that you could, of value that you could use to create the classical chiaroscuro, the very dramatic light and dark and the full value range. Silverpoint doesn't have that. I would personally say Silverpoint exists in the range of maybe 2H to 4H in that range.
Right.
So it's traditionally lighter. Sometimes it can kind of get close to maybe an HB in value, but it's going to be in that neighborhood. And what that means is you have a compressed value range. I was also experimenting with Silverpoint on relief sculptures because one of the correlations that I found fascinating, I had to ask myself, well, why do I love relief and why do I love Silverpoint? They both have that in common. Relief sculpture deals with a compressed value range that is very, very high, particularly low and medium relief. You don't have any dark shadows. Everything is illuminated. And they talk about how in relief sculpture, you're literally blasting everything with light. In traditional painting or sculpture in the round, when you have that full chiaroscuro range, you might have areas of the human body that are completely in shadow, so you don't see the form there.
Right.
It's blotted out by that. But
this picture here is a good example of your value range. You can't get that dark. I've always, one of the things, again, my viewers see me, I talk about all the time is value scale. I am like all about value. I love the value scale. We make value scales here all the time. The wall over here that I'm getting ready to paint, I'm painting a value scale wall with a color wheel on it because I'm just obsessed with that. I like to do, I paint value scales and color wheels every 6 months. And I just to keep that skill sharp. And so when I look at this, it's like, yeah, on a scale of 1 to 9, 9 being black, 0, 1 being white, the darkest you can get here is maybe a 7 on that scale. And so you can't get true black. But I love that about it. It's beautiful.
It's the charm. And I do have to say that the substrate, the surface that you're working on really matters with Silverpoint, and also the ground, because this one, for instance, is on what they call clay coat paper. Clay coat paper it's really used in the printing and packaging and advertising industry, and it's synonymous with gloss paper that you can get at the printing house. You can't really get it at art stores, but clay coat paper is generally the cellulose fibers are covered with some kind of polymer resin and then coated with kaolin clay or any other naturally occurring mildly abrasive substance.
Mm-hmm.
So on clay-coated paper of this nature, it's very smooth because of that gloss. There's not a lot of tooth to it. And you end up with the higher value range and ghost images. Think ghost images. You don't want to go darker than that because it, in my mind, it defeats the purpose and it ruins some of the charm of those ghostly qualities.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really kind of fell in love with quickly with the Silverpoint sketching. You know, I grabbed my sketchbook, I put the ground on the paper, and I started drawing, and that was the immediate reaction that I had in drawing was the images have that ghostly, ethereal feel to them,
Yes,
where it's very soft and very subtle, and it has a beauty to it that is unique to the medium, and that's really great.
I'd love to point something out there. You use the word ethereal, and ethereal, that means ether or air, or
Right, smoke like.
The air is above, and we consider that as like higher than the earth. And in art theory, they talk about value scales. Chiaroscuro full range as being like very earthbound and somber and melancholic, full of like extreme emotions, very, I don't know, like tragic comedy or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Versus the lighter value ranges are considered happier and dreamy and joyful, and all of these higher emotions that we associate with an elevated spirit.
Yeah.
The word ethereal is definitely that too. So I think you can tailor your subject matter and capitalize on that and do things that are a little more lighthearted and of that higher human spirit.
Yeah, and again, that was my initial, just your initial gut reaction when working with this with the medium, that feel that it had and how it made me feel and how it felt working with it and stuff. And so that was really impressed me about it. I can't recommend people giving it a try if you've never done it before. Finding some Silverpoint. On that note, I want to show some people some of the things that you have available, and I'm going to put it on here. I'm going to full screen you, and I'm also going to put some of these products that you make on here as well, so people can see. Tell us a little bit about your stylus that you've made. You have made your own stylus. Again, here's the pen that I've been using, and it's it's tiny. It's tiny, this little stick, and I can draw with it just fine. But it's like drawing with a fine point marker. The lines you make are very, so to do like blending, you can't put this really on its edge and shade with it. It's a little more. It's all cross hatching or none with this. And so you have come up with your own styluses that are much more unique and seeming to me that would be really fun to play with. You also make your own hand-bound sketchbooks bound in leather that are just absolutely gorgeous. You guys got to see this. So I'm going to full screen you. I'm going to put these graphics on the screen with the link to your Etsy store so that they can check it out themselves. So tell us a little bit about why you started to make your own, like what was the reason? And then also what's the benefit to the way that your stylus in particular is different from like the one that I've purchased?
Sure. Well, I would say a lot of it, the things that I make, I ultimately started making them for me. And a lot of the Silverpoint materials are simply not available on the market. I don't know who else sells Silverpoint sketchbooks. I don't know who else sells nice stylus. So a lot of the products that I started inventing, and to my knowledge, all of my products are completely unique. Um, I started making because there was a hole in the market, and I think as classical revivalists, as a lot of us are, we want to see a renaissance in the skill and the art. And I'm on board with that. But what I started to realize is sometimes lacking is a revival in the quality of implementation and tools. And, a lot of uh, the quality tools faded from the world at the time of or after the Industrial Revolution, and things just weren't made well anymore. So yes, there are less expensive styluses on the market. Mine are designed by me uh, based on Renaissance designs and older styling. And the intention is for them to be aesthetically beautiful. We are aesthetic people, and I really think that your life should uh, mirror your art. So I like to draw with something that's beautiful, and I like the drawing to be beautiful itself. So these are cast in solid silver sterling, and they are 275 plus shipping. So it's about 6 inches of silver, and it's made to last a lifetime. I would say the benefits are that it feels special, and I think Silverpoint has this unique connotation. And when you're drawing with my stylus, I hope that you would feel that you're having a special um, experience. So I wanted to elevate the romantic quality and experience, and uh, there are some practical reasons for the design. The ball end you can actually draw with and use for soft shading, and the point you can use for hard edge drawing. But I would say what is different about my design than a lot of others is most people, or a lot of people, will draw with a very thin wire. And with a pencil, you think about the diameter of a pencil, it's about a quarter inch. So when you draw with the edge of a pencil, you can really cover uh, a swath of paper and kind of use your pencil edge to make wider lines. And you can do that with the stylus too. So the design gives you three different capabilities: a soft edge on the ball end for shading. You can draw hard lines. You can also use the edge. And I have also uh, invented a lot of new products which nobody else sells. I have soft edge shading tools for Silverpoint that are basically metal wool swabs on a wooden stick. So I have uh, gotten silver wool, pure silver wool, and essentially I'm manufacturing Q-tips out of the silver wool. So that's really good for doing soft edges, and I go back and forth between this instrument and others. So there's a lot of talk in the metal point world about using dead soft metal versus hardened metal, or sterling versus pure silver. And, that matters a little bit, but I think it's an unimportant detail in my mind. I think people have done silver point with all of the metals over the century, and I chose sterling for this because it's harder, It's more durable. It's not going to bend. Pure silver would bend more. And also, it's important to keep in mind that we look at Silverpoint in the Renaissance and we fall in love with it, not really realizing that their silver alloys were most likely different then than they are now. Renaissance silver, for instance, was about 50% silver, 50% copper, or 75% silver, 25% copper. And the sterling that we have now is 92.5% silver, and the rest is copper and other ingredients. So the beautiful thing about metal point is the metals that tarnish will result in a drawing that tarnishes, and a higher copper content is going to result in more oxidation of the drawing, more tarnishing, because copper is, in my opinion, a more volatile metal. So I opted for sterling because it has the copper in it, and my drawings will turn sepia tone a little faster on the paper. The styluses are also available in copper and bronze and brass and any number of other metals. I'm also making a line of ebony and silver styluses. And I also started making books to go with them. So I taught myself leather working and researched papers and found some of the nicest paper I've used, which is calcium carbonate coated. And that's what I'm making my sketchbooks out of. And I do all the dyeing of the leather. I design it. I cut every single page by hand. I even make the silver buttons on them. So I do silver.
Yeah, I've been watching on your Facebook the process of you making these sketchbooks, and you even, I mean, you've got a jig just to cut the pages. You know, and you're slicing them by hand. You know, this sketchbook that you're looking at, for my viewers that are watching, this is when you say handmade, this is like handmade. He is cutting the pages. He is stitching them together. He is binding them into this leather that he has cut by hand. He is forging the buttons and every piece of this is literally created by Gavin's hands personally. It's unbelievable. Now, you were telling me about the pen. I'm going to bring the pen back up. Bring that in there. The stylus that you have here, number one, it's absolutely gorgeous. Now, when I looked at it, I initially thought you turned it on a lathe. But you did not do that. You used your sculpting background and you sculpted this. And then so do you do like, you pour the metal into a mold? How do you do this exactly?
So these, my original prototypes were actually done on the lathe. But that was, you know, it's easier. Even jewelers will tell you, just get them cast. It's easy enough to do that. The problem with turning them on a lathe is wood is dangerous enough if you have wood that snaps on the lathe, but these are metal, so you would essentially have a bullet projectile.
Right.
So it's dangerous. My process for working with metal is more related to my background in sculpting, where I make a master, make a rubber mold, and then cast them. And so these are all cast and then hardened, so they're not going to bend as easily. And I've started branching out and doing other metals, other designs. I do the leather pouches. That's my company logo.
By the way, you have one of the best logos, period. That's a sweet logo. I made a lot of logos in my day in graphic design, and that's a sweet logo. Simple, clean, Nice logo. Good job, buddy.
And it's all of my initials, Gavin T. Gardner.
Yep.
I wanted the two G's to meet in the middle and form a T for my middle name. And so I designed that years ago. And so, really, I plan to make a lot of other products. I also came up with a unique product that I've never seen on the market called a panel book. And Silverpoint historically always went hand in hand with egg tempera. Way back in the day, before oil paint was really in use, and they would use Silverpoint on true gesso panels, rabbit skin glue, calcium carbonate, chalk, other things. And the silver takes very, very well to it. And that's one of the points I was going to make earlier. The figure drawing on the blue that you showed on the screen earlier.
This one here?
Yes, that is on true gesso, which is why you can get a darker value. So I was saying that the surface that you're working on dramatically influences the value range, etc. And all the different metals have their own value range. So gold point, like a 24 karat gold point, I would put that at like the 6H value range. Mm-hmm. And I never really encourage people to mix the metals on the paper because you're just going to get crazy results that probably wouldn't be aesthetically appealing. But you can start your drawings with a graphite pencil. Some of the Russian academies that are teaching Silverpoint drawing encourage that, because you can draw with a 6H and erase it. Silverpoint does not really erase. And if your drawing is still exposed, it doesn't matter because graphite and Silverpoint look the same. But the silver is going to tarnish kind of sepia to brown over time. Historically, when Silverpoint was done on true gesso, they would then go over the true gesso with egg tempera. And as we know, egg sticks to everything. If you've ever seen egg on a car, it's not coming off.
It's not coming off ever, yeah.
Yeah. So Silverpoint was used as a method of underdrawing, and you could do a lot of mixed media. Fred Wessel does Silverpoint now, and he combines India ink with, I think, a couple of other things, Silverpoint, and then does egg tempera over top of that. So that is the history of traditional Silverpoint. And so Silverpoint drawing, the thing about the true gesso is because of the rabbit skin, it's brittle, it cracks. So you don't want to put a true gesso ground on paper unless it is mounted to a panel.
I gotcha.
So I wanted to come up with books that could be used for egg tempera and drawing and painting and all of those other things. So they're called panel books. And there might be 12 to 16 panels in a book, and they're literally painting panels that I've laminated the highest quality paper to and applied any of the traditional grounds or acrylic grounds or whatnot. So there's that, and I make a lot of paperback books, hardbound books, leather books. Then there are the soft edge shading tools with metal swabs, which are my unique invention. I haven't seen those anywhere else. And I'm trying to fill a need, which there are other people selling products. Natural Pigments has some excellent products. I use their traditional ground all the time. And their stylus is great. They have a stylus for $20. You can put wire in and whatnot. And I think that that's a good place to start. But for me personally, I like Silverpoint because of the genteel, fine metal, uh, the, the the notion of romantic beauty that goes along with it.
Right.
And all the people who buy my products, uh, they enjoy. I mean, it's like, do you want to eat your fine meal off of a paper plate, or do you want fine china? And these things do affect the experience. And
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the thing. A lot of my students that are new painters, they'll take my class and they'll come into a painting class and they're bringing in the cheapest Walmart oil paints they can, and the cheapest Walmart brushes they can get, and they're brand new to it. They're trying it out, and then they can't figure out why they can't get the paint to do what they're seeing in the class, like doing the exercises and like, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Okay, ready, go. And they're struggling with it. It's like, well, that's because you're using extremely cheap paint. You're using cheap brushes. And then my students, that it clicks. And I say, if you buy professional grade paints and professional brushes, you're going to see that they last longer because they're much higher quality. And they are also they work better. And so, when you start working with a quality product, it's going to last much longer. It's going to do what it's supposed to do, and it's going to do it easier. And that goes to the old adage in the military: work smarter, not harder. And your products, they are handmade. They're quality craftsmanship. They're the finest of materials. Are they more expensive? Yes, but what you're getting for it, I mean, your stylist, like you said, it's going to last a lifetime, and that's going to make a big difference. And I can already tell from just by the shape of it and the way that you've designed it, the drawing with it is going to be a much more pleasurable and satisfying experience, because I'm going to be able to do what I want it to do, as opposed to struggling to get there with this little wire on a stick, and that's a big deal. That quality craftsmanship is great. We are over time, which is fine because this is great. So we're going to wrap it up here, Gavin, but I want to thank you for coming on. This has been absolutely a great conversation. I want to continue this conversation. And so we're going to have you on again to talk a little bit more about this and some other topics that are near and dear to our hearts. And I can think of about 20 more conversations you and I can have on the air that'll just make fun TV. So, or is this TV or this web? I don't know what you call it, but it will be great. So, guys,
thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. We'll stay on the line here real quick because I want to talk to you a little bit after we go off the air. But I'm going to do this little wrap up here, guys. So, Gavin, again, thank you very much for coming on. And I will talk with you in a few minutes. And, guys, I'm going to talk to you real quick right now. So there, right there it is, right there. That is his Etsy store, guys. Just basically go on Etsy and search Gardner Design Company, and he'll come up and you'll see all of his products. They are absolutely gorgeous. They are phenomenal. You are going to, you're going to want them bad. They're just great. If you have never tried Silverpoint, maybe some of you have never even heard of Silverpoint. I have just now gotten into it, and I got to tell you, it's addicting. It is really, really addicting. I'm going to show you. I got my sketchbook right here. I've been doing some doodling and some sketching, and look, I just did. This is my first sketches that I did. With the with my Silverpoint in my little sketchbook. This is my sketchbook. I carry it with me all the time. I got, I do my gouache paintings. I do my plein air painting in this, and but I got some Silverpoint in there, and I got a feeling this thing's going to get filled up quick with some Silverpoint, maybe some gouache over that. I don't know. But guys, check his stuff out. You are going to love it. One of the things about the Gagnon Atelier podcast for the Modern Masters is I like to bring on artists that, they are successful in their career. They've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. And Gavin is one of those people, award-winning sculptor, manufacturer now of Silverpoint stylus, artwork, and a proponent of that, bringing like he said, a renaissance back, harkening back to products from a bygone era that are just stunning, and sharing that art with the world again, kind of reintroducing it to the world. I just think that's fantastic. I hope that you enjoyed today's broadcast. Again, if you like this content and you like what we're doing here at the Modern Masters podcast, be sure to like the Gagnon Atelier Facebook page, and also go on over to our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search Gagnon Atelier. And then, of course, it's spelled Gagnon, but it's pronounced Gagnon, because we are a proud French people over here. But anyway, guys, check out those pages. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We really appreciate you coming out. Next week, I am going to have my pal, Patrick Reynolds. He is going to be coming on, and he is going to be talking to us about how he sells his artwork. And he's going to be talking about the art festivals. If you've ever seen an art festival where you have every artist has a tent and they sell their art that way, he is like the art festival king. He goes and works the art festivals every year and has for as long as I've known him, which is a really long time. He's going to be talking to us about that and how does an art festival work. If you're an artist or you've been curious about going to an art festival or selling your art at an art festival and you don't know how that works, tune in next week. Tell your friends about it, because he is the expert in this area. Trust you, me. So that's next Friday. So again, guys, thanks for watching. I am excited. Just remember, I'm your old pal, Tim. God loves you, and so do I. We'll talk to you next week.